The following podcast is an enticing media production.
Where the Nell have you been? Join us for conversation about life, business, and everything in between. Welcome to What the Nell, where we've got stories to tell. Here's your host, Nell Tice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of the What the Nell podcast with yours truly, Nell Tice. And I am super excited today because I do have a very special guest with me by the name of Jon Keeney, who is a real estate entrepreneur and one of the co-founders of Quick Lock Storage. Over the past 8 years, Jon has been a full-time real estate investor and focusing on real estate redevelopment projects throughout central Pennsylvania. These projects have ranged from single-family homes to multifamily and commercial real estate. Over the past few years, he's shifted his focus increasingly to self-storage investments, including the growth and acquisitions of Quick Lock Storage portfolio throughout the eastern United States. The company currently operates 6 self-storage facilities and is looking to continue their growth in 2024 and beyond. Prior to real estate, though, Jon has worked for one of Fortune's Global 500 companies in the clean tech and electric vehicle industry. I'm also very interested in that. He's managed national business development, including relationships with companies ranging from Amazon to T. Rowe Price. And Jon is currently residing in York, Pennsylvania, with his wife and 2 children. Welcome, Jon, to the podcast.
That seemed very long-winded, but thank you so much.
Well, you know, we are no shortage of information around here at the What the Nell podcast. So you obviously have a very long experienced history in everything that you do. And I'm really happy to jump into this because it's not often a topic that is explored, which is self-storage. Can you explain to us what exactly self-storage is?
Sure. Yeah. So self-storage is, a lot of folks probably think of typical metal buildings. They're in a lot of industrial areas, but it is just an extension of the home, basically, or another garage, coming in all sorts of sizes. So there we have, small 5x5 type spaces, especially they're more popular in more urban areas, in college markets, and that ranges all the way to, 10x30 spaces for, much larger things. So storage is something that I think got popular, in the 80s and 90s, and certainly became even increasingly popular in the aughts. We do live in America. We have a lot of trouble getting rid of things, myself included. And so, yeah, storage has become something that I think a lot of folks are very familiar with, and some use on an ongoing basis, not just when their life is in some sort of transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I come from a digital space where storage is something that's very, I don't know if I should call it underrated, but it's something that's not often thought of. And, I do video, so video files are very large, and I have to really think about storage in some of the stuff. And it's not any different than physical things that we all have, memories and things like that. But what are some of the strangest things that you've ever seen in storage for somebody?
Oh my gosh, we have had quite the list, but
Sure.
we acquire a lot of urns, which you would
Okay.
not think that people would leave urns behind. Part of the process in storage, and we can get into this later, but it's not like a house where if somebody stops paying, there's a whole eviction process. In storage, we have what we call a lien sale. So you
Oh.
basically are taking a lien on the items, and if everybody pays on time, then they're certainly welcome to continue to have access to it. But sometimes people just kind of fall off the face of the planet, it seems, and we get these storage units. And so that is a time you see storage wars that kind of popularized it. And so they make it look far more glamorous, I'll put it that way, than it truly is. But you come across all kinds of things, a lot of junk, but definitely some valuables, precious metals come across. But yeah, urns are probably the thing that we see the most. That's just so strange to me that you're living your I would think a loved one, just kind of behind to
Yeah,
be
that seems
present
more
for
of like a
somebody else.
mantelpiece to me.
Would agree. I would agree. I would not put that in storage myself. People do crazy things. So that's probably one of the stranger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so take us through the process. Like, what's the process like, and who's it for? And how do you handle when somebody just does drop off the face of the earth? What's everything like?
Sure. So storage, and one of the reasons that I was so attracted to storage from a business owner standpoint is the way that we've been able to kind of create an automated system. It's really a simple model. So folks come in, they just need access to this space. There's a lock on their unit door, and that's kind of it. So, being able to automate processes and make it so that people can rent really 24 hours a day. We have a special type of lock that we use. So if somebody comes in, they can rent a unit at 2 o'clock in the morning
Oh,
if they
wow.
feel like they they need to, or we get those
Hiding the bodies.
on the 30th of the month, or the 31st. Right at the end when somebody's moving or doing something, and we have the automated system set up where they get their lock code automatically. They can go in, unlock the unit, and unload their stuff. And so people are finding us typically online. We do purchase a lot of facilities from what we would call mom and pop owners.
Okay.
So people that, they've owned this business for a long time, maybe kind of an avatar that I feel like we often see is somebody owned maybe a mechanical company, or they own a small electrical business in the town, saw the opportunity in building storage maybe in the early aughts, and mom ran it on graph paper, and they had a phone book ad, and that was it. So they're either getting traffic from folks driving by and seeing it, or they're looking at the phone book. So it's a pretty short putt for us to move these facilities kind of into the 21st century, just through having a fully responsive website where you can fully rent a unit without needing to speak to anybody on your phone in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And we do also use a call center for all of our facilities. So, if somebody needs to call and be walked through the rental process, they can do that as well. But the biggest thing is we don't, because all of the leasing takes place online through electronic means. Nobody needs to be there to ever see or ever meet these folks. So I just get notifications, on my phone all day saying, this person moved in, this person moved out. So from that standpoint, that's what really drew me to this business. I knew that I wanted to make whatever I was starting to get into in this stage of my life more and more non-place specific. And I know that's gotten more popular, post-COVID, but that's been something that's been a driving force in my life and kind of my decisions around what businesses am I getting into, what am I doing? And this one really checked those boxes for me. So yeah, that's so I love it. And I'm kind of a geek for storage. It's not a very sexy business, but yeah,
Doesn't have to be.
I love it. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. And I did want to ask too. I mean, obviously, after you explain it, it's easy to see why someone would want to be in that business. That's amazing. But you were in real estate, still are maybe.
Sure.
But what was kind of the catalyst behind you saying, okay, I really am going to pull the trigger and get into the self-storage business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to back up, you're exactly right. After the corporate world, I was very active in the residential space, flipping houses and owning residential rentals as well. So, single family houses, small multi-units, that kind of thing. Just because I had seen real estate really be such a path for wealth building. So, from that standpoint, I was kind of enamored with real estate in general. And then as I discovered through the years that business was very hands-on, and my focus of wanting to say, okay, well, how can I make this business be as non-place specific as possible? With running a real estate investment company, you're needing to go out and see houses, you're needing to run rehab crews and oversee projects, and that can be a lot trickier to do. It's possible, but it can be a lot trickier to do remotely. And so kind of in this next phase of trying to decide what was interesting to me and where did I want to focus my time and attention, I was looking for assets again that could be run this way. And so had a couple real estate mentors in the central PA, Lancaster area,
Sure.
who had been in storage before, and hearing about the business just really felt like it was gonna check again a lot of those boxes. And so
Yeah.
started looking into it, but I had no experience doing any of it.
Yeah.
And so through a networking event, met my now business partner in the self-storage space. And we had met years prior when self-storage was nothing that I was remotely thinking about, but knew that he had experience doing that, and serendipitously ran into him some years later and just approached him and said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing in this business, but I have some get up and go, and I'm willing to go hustle.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm kind of thinking that I'd like to do. And so he was all about it, and we just kind of formed that partnership and started going after and acquiring these properties. So
Love
yeah.
that. I love that. I actually was just recording a podcast yesterday, and I said, as an entrepreneur, if you don't, or if you didn't before you were entrepreneurial, if you didn't believe in the universe or faith or anything, something like that, once you become an entrepreneur, you will believe in something, because those moments are, that's what creates your future. And, serendipitously meeting your business partner at a networking event. Obviously that was all worthwhile.
Absolutely. And those kinds of things where, certainly that wasn't my focus that particular evening, but, I think getting yourself out there, which isn't always easy to do as an entrepreneur, you're grinding, with your head down in your own businesses, but remembering that it's important to connect with other folks. It's important to, kind of put yourself out there and be vulnerable and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, but I don't know how to do it. I think one of the things that I've found certainly in real estate, but also very much in self-storage is, and one of the great things about the industry is there's a lot of people out there that are willing to share. They're
Yes.
willing to help you get to kind of the next level and help you learn through their experience, which is huge. And so again, and I think I had mentioned this to you before, pretty much everything that I know how to do, and I don't think it's a unique story these days. I had a typical college education, but typically everything I do these days, I learned somehow either through reading books or on the internet,
Yeah.
or going to meetings and meeting people. And so I think trying to reaffirm for folks that that's okay, and trying to find your path through maybe a more unconventional means, I think is something that we're very blessed with.
Yes.
With technology these days, and I feel like I'm a kind of a walking example of that in what I do today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that statement. I didn't finish college. I do have several friends and family members that did, and may or may not be using their degree in some form or fashion. But no, I came across an email from our local chamber of commerce the other day about presenting a career day at a local school. And I thought, I just wish that I could go into a school and say, you don't have to go to college.
Yeah.
You can start your business. You can do this and that. And I thought, I don't know that the school's going to like that.
Man, I feel like I have lived that same dream in my own head. And just even any kind of business, any kind of finance acumen, that kind of stuff, I feel like is, not to get on a soapbox in that direction, but is not covered by our current school system. And so I think I have a lot of those feelings of saying the world is your oyster, and it can be college, it can be the trades, it can be any number of things. But I think also this idea, and maybe it was more prevalent, or I felt it was more prevalent when I was growing up, of like, you're gonna go and get an education, and then you're gonna do this, and that's this stagnant point.
Yes.
And I feel like that has definitely not been my life experience. I'm guessing if you talk to me in another 10 years, maybe, I think I'll still be interested in storage and still holding that, but I might have, this other thing that I'm enamored with. And so I think there's a balance, and I think people need to understand that it still takes a lot of hard work, and you gotta, focus on something for a time, but don't feel like, that's the only thing that you can do. So I hear you. I hear you. I wish we could get more entrepreneurs into the schools to even just, have these kinds of open-ended conversations.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So this is an entirely different podcast episode to be had. And you never know, that could become a series because that is such a,
Yeah, love
I
it.
end up talking about that a lot with entrepreneurs and podcast guests and everything. But yeah, that's something that I feel very strongly about. I'm a graduate of YouTube University,
Yeah.
and it's funnily enough, a lot of what I do is relating to YouTube. So I now am working for the university that I
Hmm.
graduated from. But yeah, so kind of getting back on track there. I love that conversation, though. It's an important conversation to be had for sure. But in regards to real estate and entrepreneurs, I know that you mentioned real estate being such a wealth builder, and it is probably one of, if not the best ways to invest your money. And as entrepreneurs, businesses grow and we start to make more money, we need to think about places to put that investment into. And so, how do you suggest someone, an entrepreneur, somebody new to the real estate market, how do you suggest someone enter into that?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think so oftentimes it starts kind of with the end in mind. So I think getting this broad education, and there's so many resources online to just start poking around and learning about real estate. For me, and this was years ago, the resources changed a little bit, but Bigger Pockets, I don't know if that's something that you've ever run across, but it was more grassroots, I think, at the time, but really just a community of people that are doing real estate
Yeah.
and understanding, you hear from people that own single family houses and that's all they've ever done. And they've bought a single family house, one single family house every year for 10 years or whatever
Right.
it is, and have done very well and created a thing that works for them. And some folks focus on apartments, some like me are in the commercial space. And there's, once you even get into commercial real estate, which is where self-storage kind of sits, you realize how many different little niches of commercial real estate there are. So there's
Wow.
so many opportunities in real estate. I think so many people focus on just residential, just
Yeah.
houses. And I think it's because it's one of the easiest entry points. So I get it. And I think it can be a wonderful tool as well. The tricky piece, and I don't think it's a secret to anybody in the last few years, is real estate has been difficult to buy. It's been very
Yeah.
expensive, and it is really tough these days. Take the example of a single family rental property. It's very difficult these days to make a property in central PA, especially in the suburbs, especially in Lancaster. I'll use that as an example. But I think, are you up in Lebanon or,
Yep. I'm in Lebanon, South Lebanon.
those areas? So like, it's difficult to make the numbers work. And so
Yeah.
if you're looking for cash flow, you're looking for something to start on this path to, financial independence.
Right.
It is tricky to do it in that asset class right now.
Sure.
It's not that it can't be done, but for folks that are, entrepreneurs, maybe they have a kick in business and they're making, plenty of money, and they don't necessarily have the time, but they need places to sort of park funds. I think that even assets that aren't necessarily doing great as far as cash flow can still be really good. Also because of my opinion of the area that we live, which is that it's like, this area of central PA has been very stable.
Yeah.
The rest of the country kind of goes through these big, peaks and valleys, and not that we don't see similar things, but it has just been folks that have held for long periods of time and just really gotten appreciation have done very well. So it's not a great answer to your question, but I think for entrepreneurs, knowing what you're trying to do, are you trying to be active in your business? Are you an electrician or a plumber? Can you fix things? That is a great way to build sweat equity in homes.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
great.
that's awesome versus are you, a tech-minded person that doesn't know how to swing a hammer, that might, shift you into a different space where, either dealing with properties that you can have professional management, or again, getting into commercial real estate, which is easier to do than, sometimes you might be led to think. I think people think about commercial real estate and not really individuals necessarily owning these buildings that you're driving past. You think,
Right.
oh, well, some corporation or some company owns that. And I
Yeah.
think only through being in this space and realizing, oh, that guy owns that building, and I know who he is, and that starts to break down those barriers and say, oh, well, I could probably do that too. So,
Yeah.
in some cases, especially in commercial, now if you do something like laundry mats or something that's high touch, that's not very hands off. But you can also get into things which are called triple net leases, where your tenant pays for everything. They pay for all the maintenance on the building. They pay for all of the taxes, even on the building.
Oh,
They
wow.
pay for everything. And so you see a CVS as an example. They don't own that building typically, but they lease the building and they lease it on a triple net, so that they're paying all of the expenses. So that's a very low touch way to invest in real estate. Higher dollars. You need more to play in that area, but
Sure.
there's just a lot of ways to skin the cat. So I know that was not a good answer to your question, but I
No,
think
it's a great answer.
educating yourself on kind of the breadth that's available to you, and
Yeah.
then trying to think, okay, well, what do I have time for and what do I have interest in doing, I think is kind of the crux of it before you get started.
Yeah, no, I love the answer that you gave. And you touched on something I think that's really important too. And especially for those of us here in central Pennsylvania, I think that you're right. The area has been super stable, but I know personally in our area in South Lebanon, we've had a lot of steady growth. And we've had a lot of things popping up. For God's sakes, we have a Target now, which is like we have multiple Starbucks. I mean, it's like, what's happening
I hear
in
you.
this world here?
Uh-huh.
But it's also important to know, and I wouldn't know this if I hadn't listened to podcasts or read books, but there's short-term, midterm, and long-term rentals too. And
Absolutely.
just because you live in this area where it's very difficult, things are very expensive and it's growing, there might be a place in the Midwest that might make sense for you to buy. And because, midterm rentals are a big deal for like traveling nurses or people that are
Hmm.
displaced, and thinking about different areas of the country, because just because you're here in central PA doesn't mean you can't buy in Idaho. And what do people want? What are trends? And where is, yeah, like less touch too, I think is something important that you mentioned
Yeah.
too. And I do have a couple of friends that have like Airbnbs, short-term rentals.
Hmm.
There's a lot more involved in that too, communication wise, for sure.
For sure.
And so, yeah, I think it definitely depends on what are you good at? What's your skill set? How involved do you want to be? And looking at the big picture. So I think you encourage that, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we get closer to the end of the episode, I did want to ask you, because I know that you have some background in electric vehicles and clean tech, things like that. I think, is it just California that by a certain year, all vehicles have to be electric?
Stretch me in a space that I have not been monitoring in the same way. But I think there is that, and then I think there are some countrywide
Yeah.
goals
Yeah.
as well. And I don't know that anything has real hard backstops to it at
Sure.
this point. But yeah, definitely California is one that's been pushing for quite a while.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the possibilities of a mandatory regulation stating that we have to go to electric vehicles?
Ooh, that's another loaded question. I like it. So I think it's tricky. And one of the things, not to get too far into the weeds, but
Yeah.
again, a space that I was in for a little while, one of the biggest issues is the grid, and that hasn't
Mm,
changed. And so, the dawn of air conditioning was actually the biggest like increase in electrical usage
makes
that we've
sense.
seen, which was huge. And so the grid had to adapt to this influx of not just, I don't want to call it an appliance, but not just
Right.
whatever it is that's taking a lot of electric, but it's only taking a lot of electric at certain periods of time, right? It's not, in the summer it's
Sure.
big, in the winter it's not. So to create this infrastructure to support something that is only running part of the time,
Mhm.
and then to also say, okay, well, during these times we have to have a lot more power coming onto the grid. These are all very real issues with the grid in general. And so
Yeah.
to come in and say that we now need to kind of cut this all off and this all needs to be electric, the truth is the grid can't handle it. It's not a thing. And so, I think as the adoption happens gradually, if it continues to happen, there's some good potential there. There's also some exciting stuff that I think could get legs. I mean, this is for better or for worse. I was thinking about it this morning before a call. I mean, I've been out of that industry for almost a decade now, but still have lots and lots of connections that are still in the weeds there. But something that we were working on, because I was on the infrastructure side, so the charging station side, is this idea of vehicle to grid technology. And I think there's still a lot of things that can happen around grid regulation by using car batteries as storage, because storage is a huge issue on the grid.
Wow.
So right now you can only pull from the grid. You can't
Sure.
necessarily push, and that there's a whole variety of reasons for that. But I think over time, as electric vehicle adoption, kind of comes into effect, there's going to be a lot more that happens by using vehicles as storage. But there's also a bunch of issues there too. You're using
Sure.
the battery more, just like your phone, if you plug it in all the time, the battery doesn't, last as long, those kinds of things. So it is complex. And like I said, I probably already got too far into the weeds, but I don't think we're there. I don't know if we're ever going to be there. And
At least in our lifetime.
and I think there's also some other interesting technology that's happening, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of cool things that could happen, but I think that we're not necessarily sitting in that place today.
Got it.
Yeah.
I love that because it causes you to think, and it's not a topic that people do really think in depth about. That's why I love asking the questions from, somebody that has at least a little bit of experience, no matter how long ago it
Absolutely.
was.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So very interesting, really something to think about, which is very cool.
Mhm.
But okay. So at the end of each episode, we have a tradition here at the What the Nell podcast to ask the guest if they have a What the Nell story for us. It can be about the topic at hand. It could be anything quirky, something happened to you this week, anything at all that reminds us to not take ourselves so seriously all the time.
Yes. So luckily you gave me a heads up on this one, because I was racking my brain. And I don't know if this is a good one. You can cut it out if it's not a good one.
Oh
So
my gosh,
don't know
I
that you,
doubt I'll have to do that.
that you cut. But the one that came to mind for whatever reason, and I'll try and keep it brief, but my wife and I, my now wife, she was my fiance at the time,
Mhm.
down in New Orleans,
Oh boy.
on Bourbon Street, nonetheless, and had a nice day, nice evening there, but things were starting to get kind of sloppy on Bourbon Street,
As they do.
as they do. And so we were, getting ready to head back to wherever we were staying. And as we're walking back, we heard a blues band at this little corner bar on the side street. And we're like, well, let's go, at least check this out for a little bit before we head back. So we go in there. There's 15 people in this bar, maybe including the band that's playing. So we go in, and there's two seats at the bar. And one of them has somebody's phone and pocketbook and whatever on it. The other one's open. So my wife sits down at the open seat, and I just stand and enjoying the band. And there's this one lady that, I don't want to call her an old lady, but an older lady, who is just dancing, having this great time, up in front of the band, but is clearly like pretty inebriated as well.
Oh boy.
And kind of watching this, and she's getting more and more into it, and kind of getting up in the band's bass, and I used to play in a band, and so I was like maybe too sensitive to that because I was.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, so she's doing this, but I'm looking around. The band doesn't have an issue with this, and nobody else in the bar seems to be nearly as bothered as I am with this situation. So I'm just kind of letting it go, and eventually she comes back, and sure enough, it was her stuff, out of the people in the bar that was sitting.
Very
on the seat. So
trusting.
she moves it. She was, yeah. So she moves it. And she's like, here, sit down. And I was like, no, I'm still a little like irritated. I'm like, no, I'm good. She's like, no, sit down. I was like, no, really, I'm fine. And she's like, no, sit your ass down. That's what she said to me. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna get in like some sort of altercation with this, elderly woman in a bar in New Orleans. So I sit in the seat. This clearly like pleases her. She's smiling now. She's happy, and she starts talking to me, and I let my guard down a little bit, and we're talking, and just kind of joking back and forth. And I'm like, and so she wasn't that bad. And all of a sudden, she just looks at me and she goes, "You don't even know." And I'll try and clean this up to keep it PG for your podcast. But she's like, "You don't even know who the hell I am, do you?" And I was like, you the owner, the drunk owner's sister. Like, I don't know who you are. And she's like, I'm Joan Baez. I played Woodstock with Bob effing Dylan.
What?
And I just looked at her and I was like, no, you're not. Like just going back to this joking thing of what is going on here. She's like, yes, I am. I was like, no, you're not. And so this goes on for a while, and I'm finally like, fine, you're Joan Baez, whatever. And she like, again, like clearly pleased with this. And she's like, I like you. And so she grabs me, kisses me.
Oh my gosh.
She at some point realized that my wife is sitting next to me and this may be awkward. So she kisses my wife and then just walks back out to the dance floor and starts like going at it again and doing her thing. And we're just sitting there shell-shocked, looking at each other as like, what just happened? And there's a woman sitting on, the other side who's got this like grin on her face. And like, cause she just saw what went down. And I just remember looking at her and being like, is that Joan Baez? And she just shakes her head like, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So that's my what the Nell Joan Baez story for you. But
that's amazing. That is one of the best what the Nell stories that I've ever heard. That's amazing. I don't know, obviously, this woman, but I feel like that is a very welcome to Bourbon Street type story.
Yes.
Like, this is what might happen to you here.
I guess, celebrity encounters and all. So yeah, that was interesting. But anyway.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. And I don't know if I should say I'm glad you have that story or not.
I'm still not sure if I'm glad I have that story either, but it's definitely something. So
yeah,
anyway.
It's conversation starter, if anything. So
for sure.
This has been an amazing conversation, Jon. I'm so glad that we were able to connect and have you on the episode today. But please tell people, where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. LinkedIn is a good one. So find me, Jon Keeney. Central Penn Group is probably the easiest company to find me under. But you can also find me on Facebook. Feel free to reach out. I love talking about this stuff. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone to listening to this episode. And we are now doing video. So make sure you head over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and give them a watch. And wherever you're listening, leave us a review. That's how we grow here at the What the Nell podcast. So as always, thank you so much. And I will catch you on the next one.
To learn more about how to tell your story, connect with Nell at enticingmedia.com. That's ENTICEING media.com. Thanks for listening to the What the Nell podcast.